o'clock, so let's get started. Welcome to the regular Delray Oaks City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 24th, and it is 6 o'clock. Karen, could you please do a roll call? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted.
There you go.
Okay, Councilmember Shirley.
Here.
Councilmember Donaldson.
Here.
Councilmember Lintel.
Here.
Vice Mayor Gagliotti. Mayor Kerr.
Here. So we're almost all here. Mr. Blaha, could you start us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge of the allegiance of the flag to the United States of America.
And to the republic
For which it stands,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and justice.
justice for all.
Thank you. And it's with great honor we have Reverend Shinseki with us this evening. It's all yours, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to begin before I read my share a reading with you to just listen to the temple bell. May all beings in the paths of existence, suffering from disasters, be released from their afflictions. In particular, today we send forth loving thoughts to the citizens of Ukraine. And on this night, we send out thoughts and prayers to those in suffering and sorrow in Uvalde, Texas. May our nation awaken to the horrors that result from our lack of conviction to stop guns and weapons from being part of our culture. May all beings in the world receive benefits and share in the merit. May we all begin to live in peaceful prosperity, and may states and nations stop any warlike activities. And finally, may the members of this council cherish the highest aspiration. May they counsel and keep each other on a peaceful path, free from disturbances, and grow in faith, wisdom, and bliss. And may they continue to deliberate for the welfare of all sentient beings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend.
It's always so nice. Let's move on to public comments. General public comment must deal with matters subject to the jurisdiction of the city and the council that are not on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the city council on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now. The public may comment on any other matter listed on the agenda at the time the matter is being considered. There will be a time limit of no more than 3 minutes for each speaker. No action will be taken on matters brought up under this item, and all comments will be referred to staff. Any public comments? Mr. Clark.
Good evening. Climate change, Carmel City Council Planning Commission article on the Pinecone from May 13th. I am hoping our Planning Commission and City Council has a more reasonable, realistic, practical vision for our future developments and renovations than the, quote, hop on the latest bandwagon because if we use these key words, people will love and vote for us, ideological mentality. It seems to surprise the politicians lately that several of us out here have brains and can do critical thinking and reach a conclusion without being spoon-fed what we were supposed to be thinking. Case in point for Carmel, electrification is the key was the title of the article. The article starts, quote, requiring renovations and new construction of homes and businesses to be all electric with no gas-powered appliances or heat should be part of the city's strategy for getting zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Mr. LePage, as quoted, is saying, we have to electrify. We have to stop burning stuff. Yet evidently, Mr. LePage doesn't seem to understand that to get the solar panels and batteries he needs to achieve this goal means burning fossil fuels and ravaging the earth for the minerals needed in the batteries, and from countries that don't quite care nearly as much as the US about climate change. Stephanie Locke says we should focus on reducing people's reliance on cars. Her solution, affordable housing for the people who work in our community by increasing housing density downtown. Yet she says nothing about selling her home so an apartment building can be built on her lot. It's always someone else's lot, someone else's neighborhood. And what I find amusing is that thought process that providing affordable housing is going to reduce car traffic. She seems to think that the folks that are living in affordable housing are going to be shopping for food and clothes and gas in Carmel. No, they're going to drive to neighboring communities that are more affordable. Oh, side point. She seems to completely ignore the fact that if you make affordable housing, you have to have water for those. And thanks to our great leadership in Sacramento, there have been no water retention facilities built in the last 40 years, even though the population of California has doubled, or from the studies done on the negative effects of wind power, hydropower. Oops, that's a non-issue because we tear down dams here in the Monterey Peninsula, we don't build them. But no mention is made of when the electricity is coming from, besides the sun, and therefore solar panels. But wait, they are talking about Carmel. Carmel is tree infested. There are trees everywhere and tall ones with lots of leaves and pines, and the result of those, sunlight does not get down to the rooftops. Oops, and it's foggy a third of the time. But who needs heat and the ability to cook 100+ days out of the year? I'm hoping our planning commission, city council, have the good sense to realize that when it comes to our development, all these climate change efforts, while well-intended, it may take longer to get there in more conservative, thought out steps.
Thank you, Jim. Any other public comments? Karen, do you see any?
I am not seeing any. No.
Okay, so we're going to move on to this month. We're going to recognize Pride Month. And I'm going to take a moment to read the proclamation. Recognition of Pride Month, June 2022. Whereas the City of Delray Oaks is a welcoming committee and an exceptional place to live, work, play, and raise a family. And whereas Delray Oaks has a diverse lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning LGBTQ+ community and is committed to supporting visibility, dignity, and equity for all of its residents. And whereas many of the residents and business owners within the City of Delray Oaks who commit to the enrichment of our city are a part of the LGBTQ+ community. And whereas Delray Oaks is strengthened by the diversity of ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents and business community members, all of which contribute to the character, talent, economy, and leadership of our city. Whereas while critical steps have been made towards full LGBTQ+ equity and equality, members of our national, state, and local communities still face discrimination, exclusion, and prejudice simply for being who they are and for whom they love. And whereas discrimination against people from the LGBTQ+ community around the world make it imperative for cities like Delray Oaks to stand up and show support for our LGBTQ+ residents, and whereas we respect and celebrate the richness and variety of cultures, values, traditions, and uniqueness as they contribute to the tapestry of our community. And whereas each of us can and should promote inclusiveness, celebrate diversity, support all fellow community members, prevent the spread of misinformation, and reject hate and bias in all forms, which will make Delray Oaks a stronger and healthier community. And whereas June was chosen as National Pride Month to commemorate the 1969 protests and demonstrations in response to raids at the Stonewall Inn in New York's Greenwich Village. And whereas June has become a symbolic month in which LGBTQ plus community and allies come together in various celebrations of pride. And now therefore be it resolved that I, Allison Kerr, Mayor of Delray Oaks, do hereby proclaim the month of June as LGBTQ plus Pride Month and encourage all residents to actively promote, support, and help build a culture of inclusiveness and acceptance. Signed this 24th day of May, 2022, Allison Kerr. On that, we're going to move forward to the consent agenda. Anyone in the public like to pull any item? Seeing none, anyone on the council want to pull any agenda item? Ms. Lintel,
Yes, I'd like to pull C4, please.
C4, okay. Anyone else? All right, Ms. Lintel, please.
Shall we take a vote on everything except C4?
Nope, let's go ahead and hear what you'd like, what comments you have on C4.
Alrighty. I am in favor of commemorating flags being flown within the city of Delray Oaks, but I feel that they should not be flown at the city hall. They should be flown at the private residences or at the Old Town Hall flagpole. I like the idea of commemorative acknowledgement, but I do feel that the proper place to have these flags flown is, like I say, at a private residence and or at the Old Town Hall on the flagpole, not at City Hall. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Donaldson, any comments?
No, I think, don't we already have a flag policy that's been signed and I guess part of accepted as an ordinance?
Yes, we do. But in this case, we do need to have a vote to display the pride flag. That was part of the, John, do you have that verbiage handy?
I do, yeah. So the flag policy approves the flying of the national flag, the state flag, the city flag, and the Tree City USA flag. Any other flag is considered a commemorative flag, and any request to fly a commemorative flag needs to come to the council with support of 2 council members. So to put it on an agenda, it needs support of 2 council members. And there's an option for the council then to approve it to be flown annually, so we don't have to keep doing it every year if that's what the council would like. Doesn't mean a previous council can't then ask for it to be reheard and reconsidered. That's an option. Yeah, so you'll all remember we did discuss the various options of whether or not to fly it at City Hall, to fly it at Town Hall. The policy allows the council to make that decision to fly it at City Hall or Town Hall, but with the preference being at City Hall if there's only one flag available.
Thank you.
Yep.
Scott, anything further?
So we have 2 council members then that have requested, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and just a reminder, so we did fly the flag last year. It didn't fall in that category of being able to fly annually at this point. That's why it's before you today, because last year predated our flag policy. The flag policy came after the fact.
Right.
Okay, I have no questions.
Okay. Ms. Shirley. There you go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I have no questions. Clearly, I brought this agenda item. I wanted this agenda item, and so I believe we should fly the pride flag. And, for me, it's a celebration of diversity, and it is an embracing of inclusiveness. And I think we need to acknowledge the LGBTQ plus community that we have within our community and in the larger community. I know we have many members of that community within Delray Oaks, and we have a lot of members who drive by our city hall, and seeing the pride flag would be very meaningful for them. So I'm clearly in favor of this.
Okay. And I just read a very lovely proclamation in honor of the members of our community that do self-identify as LGBTQ. And I want to honor them as all other residents. So let's go out to the public. Any public comment? Okay, seeing none. Oops, Ms. Vecchione,
Sorry, I was slow with the button there.
no problem.
I'm Patrice Vecchione. I live on Saucedo Avenue, and I feel strongly that we should display the pride flag. It says who we are as a city in a really basic, important way, that we are a welcoming city, that we welcome all of our residents, all of our citizens, and we are an inclusive place. If we can fly a tree flag, we can fly an American flag and the flag of California, what's the big deal? Let's honor the people who live here. We are in 2022, folks. We are not in the 1960s, thank goodness. This is the time to embrace and love each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Karen?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Oh, John Romayumi,
Oh, John, yeah.
you're mute or you're on.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Uy, and I'm a resident here at the Delray Oaks. I just want to really share to you about the rainbow flag. So as you have known, the rainbow pride flag means love. It is the freedom to choose who you love. In other words, Pride Month is a celebration of love. People have died and are dying for the right to love each other. So are we just going to turn a blind eye? Coming to Delray Oaks as an immigrant gave me hope and the promise that I would be welcomed and feel safe here. Please help me make Delray Oaks the way it should supposed to be, a welcoming and non-discriminatory community. The rainbow flag symbolizes inclusion, equality, and love. Flying the rainbow flag in City Hall is a display of our values of inclusion, equality, and love as a community. I'm pretty certain that no one will ever feel that their life will be at risk at the sight of the rainbow flag. So to our honorable City Council members, please support raising the rainbow flag in our City Hall. Let's be one and united. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other public comment? Michael Douglas.
Actually, that wasn't a public comment, raising my hand. I was just clapping for John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I will say that, it is nice in Delray Oaks that we all feel very accepted. And one of the many things I like about Delray Oaks. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. We can do Ms. Lintel.
Yes, I am not opposed to flying the commemorative flag for the LGBT community. I am totally in favor of flying all commemorative flags. but I don't think the city hall is the place for it. As I say, I believe these commemorative flags should be shown at Old Town Hall, but I am in favor of flying commemorative flags. Thank you.
Okay, so Scott, any questions, comments?
No, I guess the only question is this something that we're voting on, or is this part of the consent agenda, or I'm not quite sure what action we're taking here.
It is part of the consent agenda, but anyone can pull an item for discussion. And at this time, we have a couple of options. We can vote on the consent agenda, including this as is. We can entertain a motion for anything in regards to this event or this item. Yeah, so that's what we're at. And I'm trying to see where people are at right now.
Yeah, I would make a motion, then we approve the consent agenda as is.
I second. So Karen, could you do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Shirley,
Aye.
Councilmember Lintel,
No,
Councilmember Donaldson,
Aye.
Mayor Kerr.
Aye. So it passes 3-1. So we're going to move on to old business. And the first item is status of council chamber technology upgrades and discussion of plans for hybrid and or in-person meetings. City Manager Gerton.
Right, thank you, Mayor. Obviously, we're all starting to feel like we're coming out of the pandemic. Hopefully, actually, before I get started, I just want to thank Division Chief Blaha for attending today from Seaside Fire. One of the items that you all just approved on consent was our continued fire contract with them. I think everybody would agree with me. We're extremely happy with the service that we get from you all. Really appreciate you being here. I know you're a busy guy, so I wanted to make sure that you took the opportunity to jump off if you want before I bore you with our council chamber updates.
No problem. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Chief. So yeah, as I was mentioning, we're trying to come out of the pandemic. I think depending on the day and what's on the news, it's a learning curve that we have for how we're going to function in a new reality. And one of those things is, how do we come back to in-person meetings? I think we're all chomping at the bit to see each other again. I think we have better discussions when we see each other and we see body language and get face-to-face contact with our constituents. Online has been great because I think we've actually seen a ramping up of participation among the community. We've had folks that have participated who pre-pandemic never participated. And being able to join in from home and listen to what's happening in their city, I think has really opened people up to what's happening in the city and how valuable their participation is. So we want to move toward that. We have been moving towards that. We've been talking about that over the last few months. You all have been real supportive on some of the capital projects that we've been working on. One of those is upgrading our technology for meetings. With the idea that at least coming out of the pandemic, hybrid meetings are likely going to be a way of handling things. Whether or not a small community like ours can maintain that for the long haul, we'll see. This is an experiment for all of us. And when I talk to other city managers in the region and throughout the state, the feedback is all over the map. Some really love it. Some, a regional city manager told me that it was a new level of hell doing hybrid meetings. So there you go. It runs the gamut. From staff perspective, we want to make sure that when we flip the switch on getting back in person and back in the chambers and still having some of that online participation, especially as we start to get more people catching COVID again, but still wanting to participate. Hybrid meetings, I think, are the way to go, but we have limited staff, we have limited resources, And I want to make sure that when we flip the switch, we're ready to go with as minimal hiccups as possible. We're going to have issues. Seaside, they've been doing it for over a year now. And the chief just told me yesterday that their last council meeting, they had some pretty big technological issues. So, and they have an IT department and they still have IT problems. So all that's to say, we've been purchasing new equipment. The council chambers is looking really good. It'll be exciting for you all to come in and see it and have a meeting there. I think you'll be impressed with the work that Karen and Randy and now Lee and Yavuz, our IT support, have been doing in there. It's starting to look like a 21st century council chambers with the technology we have in there. Because we have more involvement, we're anticipating occasionally getting more people coming. We'll have overflow like we've had in the past. We're now set up for people to be in the lobby and still hear and follow along with what's going on in the council chambers. But all this is new, so we need to be able to work out the bugs. COVID being COVID, we got started on implementing the technology upgrades, and then Yavuz, our IT guy, got COVID. Now, he went to Hawaii and caught it, and his family caught it. So I don't feel too sorry for him. And they're all good. They're all recovered. But it delayed implementation a little bit. So what I'm recommending in the staff report for you all to consider is I just wanted to give you an update that we are moving on this. We're going to come back and talk again about what the realities are of being able to move to a hybrid meeting, how we manage those meetings. We're going to test it out with some of our smaller meeting committees before we bring it to the big show, and we'll need some time to do that. We should have all of the technology installed, all the system upgrades done, and ready to be tested in June. But that won't be in time for our June council meeting. Right now, the mayor and I have been talking about not having a council meeting for July. So right now we're not scheduled for a council meeting in July. So August would be the earliest council meeting that we would be looking at coming back to some sort of in-person meeting. I think that that's a reasonable goal to put in front of us. We all know over the last 2 years that, best laid plans are what they are. But right now, that would be my recommendation, that we shoot for August for our first hybrid meeting. And we will certainly keep you up to date if anything changes on that. But right now, just wanted you all to know that we're working on this, where we are, and then get some consensus from you all on whether or not that plan makes sense, or if you have any questions or ideas for us going forward.
So just for clarity's sake, looking at the agenda, we have no votes this evening. There's simply discussions and options. So on that, let's go to Ms. Lintel.
I'm delighted to hear we are considering this, because I really miss the in-person contact with the council members. I want to back up a little bit and reiterate what John said about Seaside Fire. They are outstanding. They have been so supportive of Delray Oaks and of me personally, and I am so delighted to have approved another contract with them. They are really good, and we're fortunate to have them. And again, I like the idea of the hybrid meetings, so that those who are fearful of coming into City Hall can participate in our council meetings, and those of us who want to attend in person can join everyone at the council chambers. Thank you, John.
Mr. Donaldson.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the way ahead that was outlined by the city manager is definitely the way to go. I also see the added benefits of in-person meetings, as everyone has described. I think the best comparison is in-person learning at schools. It's just a different dynamic, and there's a lot of goodness to it. And I think we're going at it in the right way where we're being cautious, but yet we're trying to get the maximum benefit that we can from our meeting. So just to reiterate, I like the direction that it's going, that the city manager outlined, and hopefully everything stays on track and we hit that August goal.
Okay, Ms. Shirley.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to thank City Manager Gurton for moving forward on this and with all of the staff support that goes along with it. I know it's a big learning curve for everyone. And so I appreciate the fact that you're willing to dive into something new like this. And it will, I know there's going to be some hiccups, but it's okay. I did have one question, John, as I was wondering, in talking to other city managers, are there any guidelines that they're continuing to use with bringing the public into the chambers? And do you anticipate implementing any guidelines?
Most are moving away from that. They, those that were able to do some sort of in-person meeting or hybrid meeting early on had different levels of requirements. So some had requirements that in order to participate in person, you had to be vaccinated. And that's an option. Right now, most have moved away from that requirement, just following CDC guidelines. And more of the discussion has been around OSHA and employment issues, specifically responding to how to pivot and how to address outbreaks among the staff, because it is an elevated level of risk that we're at by being in person. And in a few cities just recently, like Encinitas has been the most recent one in the news. There have been outbreaks at City Hall, which has required moving back to virtual meetings and shutting down City Hall briefly. And there's different levels that OSHA recommends in terms of what's an outbreak, what's a major outbreak, and how do you respond to those. It's unique for us, and we'll have to pivot quickly and have faster, broader response if we do have anybody contract COVID on our staff, because our staff is so small. And depending on who the staff is, one person catching COVID can shut us down for 2 weeks. It happened in January. So for us, a requirement could be that Karen can never take a mask off and we have to wrap her in bubble wrap. Because if we lose her and she can't come in, we're dead in the water for at least 2 weeks. So yeah, they're again, it's varying levels, but most of them have relaxed their restrictions in conjunction with the CDC relaxing their restrictions as well. So we'll keep following what the CDC and OSHA requirements are and change our requirements as we go forward.
Okay, that's good. It's nice to know that you're keeping track of those. Yeah, I support that because I want you all to be safe as well. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
So I agree with my colleagues. I too, not only do I want Karen and John and Lee safe, but I want all of us safe. We have a small council chambers, and so I look forward to playing and to see. I've been going to some hybrid meetings, and they're not as elegant as I would like, but it is kind of the wave of the future. So I look forward to whatever comes up, and I'm always available to come in and help test. So I can test from home, I can test there, whatever you guys need. So let's go out to the public. Anybody have any comments about the council chamber technology and going to hybrid meetings? I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll bring it back to council. There is no vote. John, do you have what you need?
Yes, Mayor, I think I do. Yeah.
Okay. So unless anyone has any last comments, we can keep moving. All right, so let's move on to new business. A, receive an update on city business development activities. Mr. Gurton, or do I turn it over to Jeff, Chief?
I will go ahead and talk about it, and Jeff can jump into with some of the details of what he's been working on and what the PD does to support this work as well. This has been something that's come up in the 9 months that I've been here as an area of focus for the council. Several council members have mentioned this. It's come up at both of our strategic planning retreats, and it's on our strategic planning grid as an area of focus and priority. We have a lot of initiatives underway and limited staff resources and time. So it's been a little bit kind of catch as catch can in terms of reaching out to our business community and talking with them and looking at what our economic development opportunities for our small little town. Obviously it's a priority for the council that this be an area of focus, and I'd like it to be an area of focus. We have done some things that not everybody sees and aren't sexy, but they do support this work. Simple things like we've talked about, streamlining our short-term rental process and formalizing the application process and the tracking process, and working with our short-term rental operators so that we have a better relationship with them. We're more clear on who they are, what they're offering, how successful they're being, and how they're working with our neighborhoods and with their neighbors. And so that's been good. We've really seen, and you'll see in the report that Roberto will give next, that short-term rentals are taking off again. And as we're coming out of the pandemic, that business is really growing, and we continue to get applications. I think, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we just had our 24th license that we've issued. And because of the efforts that we've made to reach out to the operators and to kind of clarify what the ordinance says and what the rules are and how to work with their neighbors, since then, we've had 0 complaints from the community relative to the operation of a short-term rental. And that's where we want to be. We want to be in that sweet spot where we're benefiting economically from it, but we're not impacting our residents or the character of our community. So that's been good. Karen has also been working on streamlining our home occupational use permitting process, which helps get folks who do businesses out of their home in. And so we know who they are. We're benefiting. They're benefiting from working with us. We're benefiting from having a business here in town. So we've been doing things like that. I've been meeting with businesses as I have time, and as I go out and meet some of the business owners. The chief obviously already has a strong relationship with most of the business owners in the community, so he continues to foster those relationships to help support me in my introductions with those folks. For the cannabis businesses, we're scheduling meetings with all of our cannabis business licensees so that we can get an understanding of where they all are in the process of growing their businesses, what we can do to help foster the growth of their businesses, and just where they see the industry going. So my first meeting is this Friday with that side of our industry. But I think it'd be better if we have a more targeted strategic plan for where we want to see economic development go in our community, and what our opportunities are for economic development, and have something in place as opportunity presents itself, as there's vacancies. We have our future opportunities out on the former Fort Ord. That all works into this. How do we develop that in a way that's going to benefit us and broaden our tax base, and still work with rather than against our existing community and commercial districts. So that's what I'm trying to say. That's more than one person can do. That's more than our little staff can handle all by themselves. the police department goes out pre-COVID. The command staff would always go out and make a concerted effort to go out and meet with the individual businesses in the community, talk to them, from a policing standpoint, but also from a city relationship standpoint of, how is the relationship working? Are there any needs that we can help them with? And just, let them know that we're aware of them and that, we're available as a partner for them. I forgot to mention that. But going forward, we've had, I think just in the last few months, we've had really good results from working with our community partners and our citizen groups. CAG has been a really good partner on helping the city when we need extra assistance with getting the acorn out and getting flyers out for events and helping us schedule events in the park. Sustainable DRO and Scott, who I see is on the meeting with us today, helping with events in the park, doing Earth Day celebration at the Butterfly Park, doing park cleanups and work memorial to help mitigate some of the invasive species. That's all stuff that other cities have staff that can do and do that. Here, we're lucky. We have involved citizenry that steps in to help us where there's gaps in the staffing and the ability of staff to do that. The Parks and Rec Committee is another one, really helping out and stepping up, not just to come up with ideas and then give it to staff, but actually take ownership of the ideas and put the staff time and the staff work into doing that. The survey that just went out to the community on all of the parks, that was conceived and drafted and implemented and completely all done by the Parks Committee. That was little to no impact on the staff. So that's a long way of saying that, I think we need to take as much advantage as we can of the volunteerism of our council, our committee members, and our community. And so I think this is an opportunity to get some good work done in a short amount of time with help for the staff. So the recommendation for that, to help keep this moving with the priority level that I think it deserves and not get consumed by other priorities, is my recommendation is to create an ad hoc committee of the council. However you all want to do it, my recommendation is with 2 council members and then myself and the chief. We'll probably tag team it as we're both available with the committee, and then at least one key member of the business community. And then that committee can then meet and help staff in a number of ways, help staff with focus on where do we want to go, what direction do we want to go in terms of outreach, economic development, where areas of opportunity to get some economic development started, but then also to reach out to our business community and engage them a little bit more in what happens here at City Hall and how we can partner with them. So with that, I'm available for questions. And if we get consensus, then we'll work towards setting this up.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's start with Ms. Lintel. Questions?
No, I think it's an outstanding idea. I really like the volunteerism of the community. I think we're very fortunate that maybe because we're small, that we can work more closely with the community than some of the larger cities, but I really appreciate all the efforts that we encounter, and thank you.
Mr. Donaldson.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great move forward for all the reasons that the city manager just said. I think it's critical, particularly for a small town like we have, that we make sure we identify the opportunities that are out there and really use it as an opportunity to diversify the revenue base. I mean, when we're going to be talking about the budget on the next item, but when you really look at it, if we didn't have Safeway in our dispensary, I'm not quite sure if we would continue to be a city. And you know, when we rely that much on two businesses, I think this type of, you know, measure, this type of committee and program is definitely going to help to not only create a good relationship with the businesses that we have, but also find new businesses that can do business in our city. So I'm very supportive of it. And matter of fact, I would like to be one of the council members that are on the ad hoc committee.
Okay, Ms. Shirley.
Yeah, I think this is also a great idea. I think you can get a lot done with a committee like this. John, I just have, again, I'm in support. I just have a couple questions. I'm just wondering, can you give me just like 3 objectives that you would like for this committee to do? If you think of the 3 top things you'd like them to accomplish, what would that be?
Yeah, I'd like them to help with outreach to the business community to, first let them know that this is a priority for us at the city organization level, and that we want to establish better partnerships with them and get their input on what the city can be doing to help them. And then the next biggest thing is really helping Jeff and I craft for the bigger council a strategy for economic development going forward, especially with this potential development in Fort Ord looming over us, and how we integrate the commercial aspect of that into into the culture and of the town, and make it work with our existing commercial districts, so that we're not establishing a new commercial entity that's competing with what we already currently have. So we want it to be, a good relationship and work for the city as a whole. So those are the big things for me, is helping us with the strategy going forward, and some of the footwork on going out and meeting with folks and talking to them.
Okay, good. So it sounds like, is this a committee that would last for a very long time? It seems like you could have, this could not ever end in terms of where it goes and the number of things that it accomplishes, especially if you're looking forward towards development in Fort Ord or development of a downtown. It seems like there's lots of different things that this committee could explore.
Yeah. So the initial recommendation is to establish it as an ad hoc committee with two council members, so that it's a little more nimble. We can meet with staff. We don't have to, it's not a Brown Act committee. We don't have to publish an agenda and do staff reports, all of that. It very well could work itself into a standing committee, where then we treat it more like our standing committees, like Parks and Rec and Police Advisory Committee, and it lasts for a long time. Yeah, it certainly could grow into that. Yeah.
Okay. And then do you envision that ad hoc committee reporting out to the larger council on a monthly basis, or bi-monthly? I don't know.
Monthly might be ambitious.
Okay.
maybe quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. No, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. I like everything that's been said thus far. I also like the idea of having a particular focus and perhaps limiting the ad hoc element of it to for a forcing function to get something, accomplished. And perhaps that has to do with the current business and what's happening currently. And then perhaps it can grow into that larger, I just think if it's too large, too broad, it can be difficult to focus on particular items. Those are just my thoughts. I think it's critical to have a business person in there, and everybody knows me, I like residents in there. I have spoken with several residents about the business environment, whether they're interested in moving a business in or ensuring that we have stability long-term. We have a lot of really smart people in town that, again, kind of tying to that volunteerism, I think add, just another richness to anything we do. So my suggestion would definitely be to have a focus or maybe a timing to get, maybe we ask you, John, to come back with the 3 objectives and we come up with a plan for those. Maybe it's a year. I don't know, whatever you think. But I also think definitely a business person, as one business person, and, I like a South Side person, a North Side person, and an Oaks, but, however that would work is fine by me. And because we're not, this ad hoc committee is not making decisions, they're just gathering information and bringing it to the council for decisions. I think to have those various voices are important. I would also, like Scott, I would also love to raise my hand to be on this too. But I think before we move forward on the composition, or at least who is in there, I think it's important to have all the council members in attendance. Those are my comments. Let's go out to the public. Anybody have any comments on city business development activity? Mr. Krieger.
Hello, yep, I'm doing good. Yeah, just only 2 thoughts were, one was definitely spend some time with Mr. Lorca, because I know we didn't do that on the sign committee and kind of got down the road a ways and realized that we had run up against some rules. So I know you want to keep it an ad hoc committee, but whatever, I would just say be sure you're upfront that you're aware of the constraints, because we sort of just kind of did the same thing. Oh, it's sign committee, we can just get going, and we did. And then down the road, we realized that there were some things that we weren't aware of, and ended up creating a lot of, some little bit of trouble to go back and fix it, which we did. But that would be one recommendation. And the second would be, as you're doing this, and I know one of this is you want to avoid the Brown Act. I understand that entirely, to keep it running smoothly. I would just say, but also be mindful of, transparency and keeping somehow working updates as you're working along the process, so you don't just like all of a sudden show up and it's a city council meeting, a year and a half later, and here's a big giant plan done, and everyone's like, first time they've seen it. So that would be my only two thoughts on it, but great idea.
Thanks, Gary. Any other public comments?
I'm not seeing any.
I'm not seeing any. I want to just make sure I give everyone enough time to get to that button. All right. I'm not seeing any. So again, we're coming back. There's no vote. John, do you have what you need? John, do you have what you need?
Yeah, so just to make sure we have consensus, and I'll take head nods. So I'll come back next month. I'll plan on coming back next month with a fully fleshed out recommendation for 2 council members, a business person, at least one business person, at least one resident, and then maybe putting a sunset on it, either a year out. We either decide we don't need the committee anymore, or at that point, that's where we make it a standing committee. And so we give it a year timeline. What are our short-term goals for them to achieve? And I think that's all the comments. Everybody good? Yeah. Okay. All right. And all of Gary's points were well taken as well too. So Mr. Lorca will be involved as well.
Pat, did you have a question, or was that a thumbs up?
No, I wondered if the chief had anything to say regarding this.
No, I'll take whatever direction from John, and just so the council knows, about 2 times a year prior, we used to go out and contact all the brick and mortar businesses through the police department. And now that COVID's over, we're actually going to be doing that again shortly. So you'll probably hear about that.
Thank you.
And so, Chief, you'll bring a report to council on that? I don't remember ever having that kind of report.
I don't know if we did a formal report. It was more on the community policing aspect of it, but we're going to start wrapping in some of the business development aspects. Maybe a quick survey or something like that. We're working on, I'll be working with the commander on what exactly we want to know.
Yeah, I think it would, to the mayor's point though, I do think it would be a good thing for maybe the commander to come to this committee and share with the committee what they've heard, and probably also with the police advisory committee.
Yeah, absolutely. And we usually ask, crime prevention and how's their service police wise, but we can wrap some, I'll work with John and wrap some questions about, would they be interested in participating in the committee if we can find a business owner that way too. So.
I also think that it's important for the 3 other council members and the public to also hear the highlights from those ad hoc committee meetings, such as, a police contact with our businesses. So that can be worked in, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Well, let's move on to what we're all here for, right? The fiscal year 22-23 recommended annual budget discussion. Again, tonight we are not voting. We are having a conversation and providing some direction, but we will vote on the final budget in June. So on that, do I turn it over to you, City Manager, or Roberto, or?
Yep. Yeah. Just to build on what the mayor was just saying. So the way budgets work, this is our proposed budget for next fiscal year. This is our best guess of where we think we're going to be at the end of this fiscal year, and where we're going into next fiscal year, and what our recommended spending plan is. There are still, based on your input today, there will be some tweaks that need to happen between now and then our next meeting in June, when you actually act to adopt the budget. So there will be some fine tuning to happen in the next few weeks based on the input we get today. So there's a few key areas that we're going to focus on to get your input. And then it's a spending plan for next year. It's not, doesn't restrict us from being able to change it going forward as realities change. And new opportunities present themselves. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roberto Moreno, our finance manager from RGS, and he's put all the really hard work into this. And so we'll let him get going, and I'll interject every once in a while.
Thank you, John. Mayor Kerr, members of the City Council. So we are pleased to present to you the proposed budget for the 22-23 fiscal year. It is balanced. Before we get into the numbers, I just want to provide a little bit more background in the sense that how these numbers came about. We looked at the history, what's taken place in the past as far as expenses, what's revenues been collected. We have input from the different department staff as to what they need for this coming year. And then we've got revenue estimates from HDL. They're the experts in sales tax. We've got estimates from the state controller's office on gas tax and things of that nature. We factored in what's required by law, things that revenues that the city is supposed to get. So all of that has come together into this document. It was presented to the Finance Committee. It's going to be presented now to the council to get direction, and based on the direction provided, we will be bringing it back in June for a public hearing and a vote based on the items that the council directs us to. Since it is a budget, I'd like to share some numbers with you on the screen. You do have the staff report, but it's always good to just have it on the screen so we're all looking at the exact same thing. So what I'd like to share with you first is what's called a budget summary by fund. So we're going to start at a high level and work our way down into as much detail as council would like to see. So by fund, there was a time when basically all the city had was the general fund. Now we've got the budget broken out by fund. The general fund, which is where most of the city's operations come about. We expect that by end of this year, at June 30th, 2022, we will have 2.2 million in the fund balance. Next year's revenues are offset by the appropriations. Everything is balanced. So there is no surplus, there's no deficit, everything's accounted for. So that is, again, what we're anticipating as a fund balance at June 30th, 2023, about 2.2 million. This is the money council has full discretion on. Then we have special revenue funds, which council can manage but does not have full discretion on. Gas tax monies, for instance, can only be used for street purposes. The gas tax money, this 25,000, is basically for street lighting and street sweeping. The SB1 monies, also technically another form of gas tax, can only be used for street related purposes. In this case, it will be used for some street improvements. Measure X, which is also basically street related. The fund basically accounts for the money that is collected. The city gets a portion through Measure X. However, most of that was spent in the past on a major project. This year, the budget is focusing on spending the remaining funds so that by the end of 2023, this will all be spent. The Flora Habitat Management Fund, there's still money there. We're still working on a plan as to how much will be spent this coming fiscal year. And of course, ARPA is a new one. As it stands right now, based on the money that has been received and what's been appropriated by June 30th, 2022, anticipate about 101,000. Another 197,000 will be received. That's the second part of the money. And based on the expenditures in the proposed budget, we anticipate about 76,000 to be left. A couple of things to keep in mind, that this gas tax and SB1 are ongoing revenues. The Measure X, this money here, once we spend it, will be all gone. The ARPA money, once it's spent, will be all gone. These are all one-time items. And the Flora Habitat, it's specifically dedicated just for that purpose. And again, once it's gone, it is gone. Then we have some capital project funds, which are specific for major improvements. This year, the Prop 68 grant fund will be used primarily for park improvements. Well, that's what it's for. There's also in the works a wildfire reduction grant. Still in the works. Of course, if we don't get it, then no money will be spent, but that is an additional funding source we're looking at for this coming year. The SBR Engineering Fund, which was money that came from Flora. Right now, it's all tied up. We're showing zero in fund balance. There is cash. It's just that technically it's all committed for the Whitson contract on the South Boundary Road engineering. We don't have any more money beyond that. And then these other two, the South Boundary Road General Jim Moore intersection and the construction, these are also monies sitting here from Flora to be used only for those projects. For right now, they will be sitting there. So this is by fund, the summaries overall. The general fund is doing good. We're balanced and we're using up these other monies for their street related purposes. And we're getting some grants to do park improvements, and we're doing some street improvements this year. And we'll talk more about those in the budget here. The document just gives a brief. Go ahead.
Roberto, before
Yes.
you go, I'm sorry. So you indicated that there were a couple of pots that once they're spent, they're spent. But Measure X, we get X amount of dollars every year. I just want to make sure people are really clear. So like the Flora Habitat Management, once the 701-904 is spent, it's spent. But the Measure X fund, we will get more, correct? Each year.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was just slightly different, that everybody understood that. Thank you.
So we will get more money, about 92,000 a year, but the fund balance, once it's spent, that money will be gone. Let me manage. So here, that fund balance comes about from when the big project was done. It was about 1.2 million. We got an $861,000 loan. Money from other sources were used when the project was said and done, because other monies were also used. We had that 100,000 left there, and it hasn't been used. We're proposing to use it, but once that money is gone, it will be gone. The only money that we will continue to get is the annual payments, but those payments are already set aside for paying the debt on this 861,300. And it'll probably be at least another 8 years out before the city has revenue to spend. So that's the Measure X The portion that will be gone once it's used is just the fund balance. There will be annual revenue coming in, but it's already set aside for paying the debt on this loan.
And then it'll be time to ask for the next loan.
Yeah, because the city doesn't get enough to do a major project in any one given year. And then, of course, this year, the ARPA money is the big one that we have, and then the Parks Grant Fund. And if things work out, maybe a new grant for fire items there. Now we're going to talk about just the general fund budget itself. So the revenues are decreasing by 216,000 in 22-23 over the budgeted revenues in 21-22. That's a 7% decrease. The major reason for this decrease is that in the budgeted amounts, there will be less expected in sales tax for 22-23 over what we're getting right now in 21-22. What happened is, since we came out of the pandemic, there was a pent-up demand. A lot of people went shopping for things, and also businesses had deferred their sales tax payments during the pandemic period. Those are being paid back, but that's money from a prior year. That money's not to be repeated. So that's why there's a decrease in sales tax. It's not a true decrease. The thing is, the revenue goes up like this and it comes down, but it's still on a straight line projected. It is an increase overall. It's just the way it works out because of the bump that we got in 21-22, which will be adding to our fund balance, hopefully. The other decrease in revenue is that there's a decrease of 122,000 in grants for housing. The REAP and LEAP grants, we don't know yet how much we're going to get or for this coming fiscal year. So that's the decrease in the housing grant revenue. We're still expecting to get some, but we don't know what number to put in just yet. Once we do, and if we do by next month, then definitely we will include that in there. The other revenue amount to be aware of is the city is guaranteed to get 100,000 for COP monies for the police department. On top of that 100,000 guaranteed, there is what's called the COP growth allocation, which is given once a year based on whether or not there's a growth in the funding source for this money. It's a decrease of 61,000 because this year, 21-22, we did receive 161,000, but we don't know exactly how much we'll be getting next year. It's given once a year, and we won't know until the state actually gives us the money. So we're only budgeting for, we know we're going to get 100,000. So we're being very conservative. It could be up to 61,000 or less, maybe more. We just don't know that number. So just at mid-year, we should know, and then we'll come back with any adjustments as a result of that. But that's the main reason for the decrease. It's not that the revenues themselves are going down. It's just budgeting wise, this is the way the numbers worked out. And we can look at all the detail too in the later on in the document. We have the detail to each of these numbers. On the expenditure side, it's basically a status quo budget. We have a 1.7% increase in total expenditures. And this is a summary by department. And you can see expenditures in total are only going up 69,910, total of 1.7% in total. The largest decreases are in planning and building and legal. So we'll explain each of these in a little bit more in detail. The largest increase is in the police department. It's still not large, it's only 3.7%. And a slight increase in public works and the city manager's budget. But there's an explanation for these numbers, which I'll get into. But overall, it's only a 1.7%. Nobody has a large decrease or a large increase. Really, let me explain these one by one. So basically, council budget is unchanged. The city clerk has a slight increase because there's some additional software that we're using this coming year to help with the workload that is ongoing now. The document management, the agenda management, and then some training for staff. You know, the smaller your workforce, the more highly trained they need to be. So that's the reason for the increase in the clerk's budget. The city manager's budget is going up because, as you saw at the beginning, all the revenues are accounted for. There's no leftover. So 31,500 is being put into the city manager's budget as a contingency amount. If something comes up, there is that money available that could be used for a contingency. The other part that has a contingency is public works. We put 31,500 as a contingency here. And that basically covers all of the revenues that the city would have, extra revenues you might say that the city might have had. This one, because any contingencies will probably come up in the police department, in the public works, or the city manager can also allocate this for other contingencies, and we can talk more about that in a minute. The auditor treasury budget is unchanged. Legal has a slight decrease just because there's been reduced legal services. Last year, the year before that, we're pretty heavy. This year, we're anticipating a slight decrease. Planning and building reflects a decrease again because of the housing element. We don't have anything budgeted yet for the housing element work that's coming up this next year. It's all tied to the REAP and LEAP grants. So we're waiting to get some numbers on that. And when we do, they'll be adjusted to the budget. The police department. So this is one we'd like to talk about a little bit. They have an increase in part because there is a proposed 10% cost of living for police officers, not for the rest of the city staff, but just for police officers. So that causes a slight increase, but staffing is continued and budgeted at 10 positions. So there will still be one vacancy, but there is a 10% cost of living allowance for the police officers, which the city manager can talk more about that here in a second. Fire, it's per the agreement that you just approved. There's a slight increase in the fire department. And the public works, the only real increase is because of that contingency. Parks and Rec stays the same.
Yeah, so let me go through those real quickly, because I want to get some input at this point from the council. So right now, so as Roberto mentioned, we're not budgeting a surplus this year or a fund balance. We're getting away from that surplus because that has a different meaning for certain people. It's really fund balance. And in years past, well, in the last couple of years, we've been fortunate enough to be in a situation where we've had more revenues budgeted than we've had expenditures budgeted. And we've just budgeted that as fund balance. It was called surplus, but it was really just fund balance. We'd like to get away from that. We should have a plan for all of the money that we anticipate coming in a given fiscal year. Even if the plan is just that we're reserving it for something, that should be something that we're talking about. So we're not just letting it sit there and not thinking about how we could be utilizing that and what are the opportunity costs. Contingency may not be the right terminology. Roberto and I were doing this kind of last minute, just as a placeholder until we could have this conversation. And especially in the city manager's budget, the 31,000 is really anticipated more at the finance committee. We talked about the need in conjunction with the recommended salary increase is to bring somebody in to actually do a formal salary and benefit study for us and go beyond just our sister agencies that surround us here and look at agencies that are similar to us in terms of services provided, community demographics, resources, all of that type of thing, so that we're comparing apples to apples in terms of where we should be in terms of salary and benefits for staff. Maybe we're fine, maybe we need to go, whichever. But I think that's something that we need help with and need a professional eye on. So a portion of this money would be allocated to that. As part of the discussion earlier about the economic development, we also talked at the finance committee about potentially bringing in some additional economic development professional services to help direct the work of the committee and also help with plans for the future forward. So this would be money that would be available for that. So this is money that we will be coming back and talking to the council about. If you want to give us input now, we can already start to allocate some of that money. But it's not there for funny money for me to just do anything I want. That wasn't the intent. The intent is to put it there so that we have some money that we can take care of some of these planned services. Kind of same thing for Public Works. Right now is in good years, Public Works is difficult when it comes to estimation and actual costs. And it's typical on most Public Works projects to budget somewhere between a 10 and 20% contingency in any of your projects. We haven't normally done that in the past year. And so when increases come, they kind of come as a surprise, and then we have to rush back to the council to amend the budget for the project so that we can finalize the project. Most grant funded projects, especially road projects, there's a requirement that you have a 10% contingency in the budget. And with the way everything's going right now, construction costs and inflation and everything costs are increasing weekly. So having money available for contingency with all of the big capital projects that we're going to talk about in a few minutes makes sense. Ron is one of the most frugal people I've ever met in my life, and he gets stuff done on a shoestring. So he's doing a great job at keeping our costs down. So I it's likely that we won't need this money for contingency for our capital projects. And in that case, I really see it being available as matching funds for grants. I'd like to put more of a focus this year on acquiring grants for some of our capital needs, and already having a pot of matching funds set aside for that makes it easier and positions us, because a lot of times we find grants with a very short time window on application for the grant. And if we already have some money set aside that we can identify as matching funds, then we're not scrambling to look for matching funds. So that's what the idea was between those two contingency line items. And as Roberto mentioned, we're still fine tuning where we're going to finish up the planning services for housing element and habitat management plan for this fiscal year. And then what's going to roll into next fiscal year. There's potential for more LEAP and REAP money for next fiscal year. We need to get a handle on where that is, and we'll have that for you when you act to adopt the budget next month. So the big thing here we talked about at the Finance Committee is the recommendation for a 10% COLA for the police department. We do have a salary survey. It's not the professional salary survey that we're talking about. It's one that we've done here at the staff level. And we've talked with the Police Advisory Committee, and I think everybody recognizes that our police department is an area of focus for our salaries. And so we talked at the Finance Committee about, maybe doing a 5-year or doing a 5% and then a 10% increase, and then taking some time to really look at apples to apples budget and workload and community and salary, and where really should we be falling in line with our other sister agencies around here. Right now, we have the lowest paid police department in Monterey County. So we know that. And I know from several of our surrounding jurisdictions that salary increases for their police departments are up for consideration for their councils. So the 10% isn't really fixing the gap that we currently see. It's really kind of stopping the bleeding and keeping us from falling even further behind. And part of why that's critical is that, I think we've all talked about in recent conversations about how we're seeing an improvement in the professionalism and the services that we're providing here in the city at the staff level. And a lot of that comes from staff retention. It's recruitment, certainly, and getting good qualified people to want to work here. And we get a long way with that, with being a stable work environment, having the support of the council, having the support of the community, and providing a really positive, supportive work environment. But that only gets you so far. Cost of living is a real issue for all of us here on the Monterey Peninsula. I've worked for other agencies where people have commuted 2-3 hours each way to get to work because of cost of living issues. And we don't want to become one of those, because it definitely impacts the quality of the services and the quality of the staff that you can recruit and then retain. So staff retention is really critically important if we want to continue to grow professionally as an organization and provide the level of services that our residents expect and deserve. And I think we're getting there, and I'd like to keep that momentum going. So that was the recommendation, was to consider the 10% and for this year, and then talk about where we need to get in the next 3 to 5 years to be competitive. And the Finance Committee was supportive of that recommendation. So
Could I just interject and can I do a quick round robin and see if any of the council have any questions at this point?
Perfect, yes.
Before you go on, Roberto. So I don't see you on my Ms. Lintel. Did we lose her?
Here, let's do this. This will help. There we go.
Yeah, I don't see her.
Neither do I.
Karen, could you call her? Just
I will.
Okay, so and Scott and Kim, if you'd like to say anything, I know that we just went over this not too long ago, but Scott, any questions at this point?
No, I don't have any questions. I would say that I agree with what the city manager is saying in terms of the focus. And also I'm in agreement with what he has to say about the police salaries. I think it makes a lot of sense that we increase, whether it's 5 or 10%, and, you know, also do that salary study to make sure that we're competitive and we're in line with the other police forces that are out there. But, you know, you look across the board, whatever profession it is, wages are increasing. And I think it's not only smart that we increase those salaries, but in the long run, it's going to ensure that we have a quality police force.
Okay, Ms. Shirley.
Yeah, just a couple questions. So John, going back to SB1, we passed a resolution tonight that predicted our revenues would be about 38,000, but in the budget on the first page, it says 48,000 for SB1. I was just wondering, is there a reason why there's a difference there?
Yeah, good catch. We have the benefit of a $10,000 trip hazard mitigation funding that we got through Ambasia, our insurance collaborative that we're part of. So that adds the 10,000 to it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm anxious to see if we get the LEAP and REAP grants. I think we should. So because not budgeting for the housing element gives me a little bit of a heartburn. So I want to make sure, right? We got a lot of work going forward. So I want to make sure
budgeted, that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's see. I'm in support for the 10% COLA increase for the police officers. I saw on the police officer budget, it was only equated to an increase of 3.7%. And I'm assuming that's because of the personnel changes. Is that where we get 33.7% increase?
It's because of, personnel changes, the less need for overtime. And then also, as Roberto mentioned, the current budget is for 160,000 for the COP funding. We've budgeted conservatively to the guaranteed amount of 100,000, but we could end up with the 160,000 again.
Okay. And then again, just to be clear, we never finished the true up with the airport last year. So will we see that again this year? I mean, I'm assuming we'll go to them with this year's true up, last year's true up, and this increase.
Yes.
Oh, that's- yeah.
Roberto,
More
you didn't
conviction,
sound very
Roberto, yes.
confident with that.
Yeah, no, so we just received the true up for the airport for this last fiscal year. So we will be bringing that back to you. We need to go over some numbers with the airport, but the numbers are all budgeted in the budget based on the contract. So what's in the contract, what's in the budget is what's in the contract right now.
Okay, okay. Great. And then as far as the contingency explanations, John, I really appreciated that explanation. So, and it just got me to think, do we have a policy for like how much you can spend on your own without coming to council? Do we know what that amount is?
Yeah, there's a cap of $5,000.
Oh, okay, okay, all right. Okay, so you're not going off to Hawaii or anything like that. Okay.
Yeah, in response to past, no.
Okay. But yeah, no, I think doing a salary survey is really important. You know, looking at economic development, you know, help with that, I think is important. So, and I know having, you know, matching grant funds is critical for being able to jump on grant opportunities. So yeah, no, I'm really supportive and I like your ideas. I like where you're going with that. So yeah, that's it for now. Thank you.
Pat, I see you.
Yeah, I'm back again.
Yeah, so
I
did you have any questions about what Roberto, couldn't tell when you dropped off, but do you have any questions thus far on the budget, what Roberto and John have talked about? You may have missed some.
Roberto and John, I really appreciate the comprehensive budget discussion item. That's very nice. I do have one question. I don't see anything where we're paying off our long-term debt. Was that considered or is that something in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, so later on, Roberto and I will talk about potential uses for the $2.3 million in fund balance. And that would be an opportunity for long-term debt. And so toward the end of the presentation, we'll come back to that if that's all right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Was that it, Pat?
Yes, it is. Thanks,
Okay.
Alex.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the contingency explanation too, because it just looked like a clunk of change.
Yeah, and I'll let everybody know that was because of my conversation with you and your questions. So that helps formulate my presentation so that I can answer it for everybody. So I appreciate that.
Well, you know me, I always have ideas about where we could spend $62,000.
And you and Scott and Kim and Pat and John, I'll keep you on my toes.
Good, good. The only thing that didn't make it here, and I remember talking about it, was wanting an increase for Ron. I think everything that he has done last year, his training, he will potentially be in charge of implementing 2 very large state grants. And I thought he was one of those increases originally. And so I'm wondering where that went.
Yeah, there's been a recent increase for his position, but if there's consensus on the council that maybe we didn't go far enough and that there is, I certainly would wholeheartedly support that. And I think that there's room in the budget. So yeah, if that's the consensus of the council, we'll put in something for that.
So how would you like us to have that conversation? Do you want us to have that now? Do you want to bring us back an idea? Okay.
No, I think now's good.
So does anyone on the council have thoughts about that one way or the other?
There are.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I would love to give not only Ron, but, Karen, Lee. I mean, I think they do outstanding work. There's no question that they should be compensated for that and receive a higher wage. What it comes down to is, how much can we do? And, that's really the city manager and, kind of coming back with a recommendation on how high we can go without it impacting other things. But man, I would love to double all their salaries if we could.
Maybe not that much. That would impact the budget. Ms. Lintel.
Yes, I'm totally in agreement with everything Scott said. Ron and the city staff do outstanding work. So how much the compensation should be increased, I don't know. I don't know how much we can afford, but I highly recommend that we do it. Thank you.
Ms. Shirley.
Yeah, I would recommend that as well. As you said, with Ron's extra training that he's gone through, and he really is a huge asset in many ways to our city. Yeah, and having to balance, apply for grants and, manage that money. I think, we've had some responsibilities added to his plate, which should be compensated for. So, yeah, I'm on board.
So John, does that give you enough to go on?
It does, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I may as well go out to the public at this point as well. I just want everyone to understand that we are not through the entire budget presentation, but there's a lot to it. So any public comment at this point on what has been discussed thus far? I'm not seeing any hands, so let's come back and I'll turn it back over to you, City Manager Gerton. Thank you for that.
Yep, thank you. And I appreciate the direction, and now we'll turn it back over to Roberto. So hopefully we didn't throw him off too much.
No, not at all. So this, let's see, now you should be seeing the capital improvement plan is the next part. Excuse me. So what we see here is a list of projects. This is what's in the budget 21-22. For 22-23, there's 688,000 in capital projects proposed for this coming year. Most of these have been discussed with council at one time or another. Just a couple of things that I'd like to kind of make clear to you is that this parking lot accessibility project, the project itself is about 120,000, and it's to be funded at this point from Prop 68, the general fund, and ARPA monies. Altogether, those funds, those sources will fund the parking lot, the accessibility project. The Measure X monies are doing these three projects. So it's all Measure X funded for these three projects, and that will use up the remainder of the fund balance in Measure X. The Prop 68 is just the grant, the ARPA monies, the grant and the ARPA money is just one-time monies. The general fund is contributing 35,400 here for this one project. The wildfire fuel reduction, we've submitted the grant. If we don't get the grant, then the project won't go forward, but that's what's being proposed at this point. And as was noted, for the curb gutter repairs, we did budget 70,000, 60 is coming from SB1, and then 10,000 is from Embasia. I don't know if, John, if you want to talk specifically about any of these other projects, or if council has some questions about these projects. This is what's in the proposed budget.
Yeah, so so as Roberto mentioned, just for those playing at home, if anybody's trying to do the math on the Prop 68 funding, the 24,000 wasn't the full amount. The other 140,000 you see was spent this fiscal year for the playground structure, which is being upgraded right now. So that's why we ended up using some ARPA money to finish the parking lot, which will be happening in August, hopefully. And then the capital project, the capital improvement plan is kind of a work in progress. This is something a little bit new for this fiscal year, and then we'll continue to grow it When we met with the finance committee, we started talking about and showing what our anticipated projects, not just what we got done this year and what we anticipate for next year, but also for the next 2 years out, and start talking about what our needs are, having Ron and staff think about where do we see the critical needs in terms of maintenance and new projects, and then talking with the finance committee and then with you all about where the funding is going to come for that. But right now we have kind of an unprecedented funding sources from several areas such as ARPA. So we're biting off more than we normally bite off in a given fiscal year. Right now we had the PD radio update on there as recommended for ARPA, and the 15,000 was just a placeholder. So I don't want people to focus on that one because that one's still a work in progress and will be that'll be tweaked, and it won't come from ARPA. We're not going to make that recommendation. That's going to be something that's going to be handled as part of the regular PD budget because it's going to be an annual cost that's going to be taken up over several years, and we can work that into the budget. So really the only big ask at this point that's not currently funded but is recommended in here is the parking lot improvements for City Hall. And we've talked about this a few times. $150,000 is our current estimate. That would be to resurface the parking lot, and more importantly, shore up the back part of the parking lot, because right now the edge of the parking lot is sinking down toward the park at a couple of inches to about 4 inches a year. And if we don't continue to maintain that and do something to shore that up a little bit, it's going to get exponentially worse, and we're going to start losing portions of the parking lot. And then on the other side, the entrance into the back restricted parking area for the PD is not the best designed for the driveway. It's not safe for staff coming in and going out. It's not safe for other folks on 218 that staff are trying to get in and out. So we want to make some improvements to that driveway. The hillside there it's all sand, so it continues to slide down and we have to clean it up. So we need a better retaining wall and push it back a little bit so that it's not something that we're dealing with every year. We can put something good in there and then it's a 20, 30, 40 year down the road issue to deal with. So that's the recommendation for that. ARPA is the recommended funding source for that. And we want to work in a couple other things. So this will be something that will develop over the course of the year, because I want this to be a 50 to 75 year project that we do here. And so I want to consider all of the options that we can do with a mindset for future needs. So I want to talk with some of our partner agencies on grants and rebates for putting in some electric car charging. While we do this, if we're going to tear up the parking lot, we should put in that infrastructure now rather than cut into a brand new parking lot a year or two later. And then, maybe some other opportunities, maybe put in some carport cover structures that have solar panels in them. I don't know. That's for Ron and I to discuss and come up with options. But if we're going to do this, like I said, I want to look at these things like the parking lot. I want to look at these things as 50-year projects. And so in the next 10 years, what do we see the needs, and can we address those infrastructure needs now rather than cutting into freshly laid asphalt and having to deal with that? So that's where we're going forward with that. And so that's really the only thing really for you all to consider. It doesn't have to happen right now. We don't even have to budget it now. It could be a future ARPA discussion, but that's one of the areas that I'm looking to recommend using ARPA funding. And if you have any questions, maybe now's a good time to talk about the capital projects and ARPA funding.
Okay, anybody? Roberto, can you take us? Well, That's okay. I can see from here. Any questions from the council? Pat? You're muted. You're muted again. I think somebody unmuted you and you accidentally muted yourself. Nope.
It keeps toggling.
Yeah. There you go.
There we go.
Don't touch it again.
There you go.
There you
Okay.
go.
Okay, I have no questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Donaldson.
No, I also have no questions. I think it's smart that we use the ARPA money and allocate the general funding to some of those other items you talked about, John, the parking lot specifically. So I like where you're going with it. I think it's appropriate we use those funds for those projects.
Ms. Shirley.
Yeah, I support the direction too. So we've talked about all this and we need to fix the parking lot that's falling down into the park. That's a good idea. So yeah, it's all good. Thanks.
I agree as well. I am keeping my eye on the state budget, especially to see how they're going to be dispensing all of their massive surplus. And I think if we can, start chinking away at little things here and there, it's good. But I think also as we look at that, there will be more and more and more kind of becoming evident of what needs further attention. So I'm all for it. Let's go out to the public. Anybody have any questions about the capital improvement plan? Mr. Johnson just arrived. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back. So turn it back over to you, City Manager. You're muted, John.
See, this is why we need in-person meetings. I'll turn it back over to Roberta.
Okay, so now we'll continue with a discussion of the fund balance in the general fund. So bottom line is that June 30th, 2022, and also for June 30th, 2023, we expect to have about 2.2 million in the general fund balance. That's the equivalent of 53.4% of the estimated revenues for 22-23. So basically, we have a 53% of our operating costs covered by the available in the fund balance. Now, in years past, the council had prioritized the use of any surpluses that you're in to put 150,000 into a Section 115 trust to help pay the ultimate cost for CalPERS, which are about 1.5 million. So the plan was to put 150,000 each year. In 10 years, we would cover the unfunded accrued liability. The nice thing about putting the monies in here, which is what staff's recommending, is that they're still under the control of the city. They're not, we haven't turned them over to the CalPERS so that then CalPERS can do with it as they please. It's still under the control of the city, but the city can only use it for CalPERS retirement purposes. So if we built up 1.5 million and the city wanted to pay off its unfunded liability, it could just pay it all off. Or if there was a major recession in the next year or two and we needed more money, we could use these monies that have built up to pay the retirement costs, the regular every year retirement costs. So in that case, the money could be utilized for that purpose. And that's how the city council retains use of that. Now, investing in the 115 trust, the city is currently investing in the moderately conservative High Mark Plus, which yielded a one-year investment return of 16.98 as of March 31, 2021. Things have changed, so it's not anywhere near that, but it's still the fact that the city has put in 300,000 into that account and the balance is about 340,000 shows you how well the account has done. It's valued, it goes up and down, but it's so that's one use that staff is recommending, to add another 150,000 to that, because right now through the local agency investment fund, we're getting less than 1%, way less than 1%. This puts a little bit more earnings into that. And then the other recommendation is to come back at mid-year with a fund balance policy to guide the use of this fund balance. Some things to consider is to maybe set it at a specific percentage. Other government agencies use 15%, some 25%. Nobody sets their fund balance to be at 55%. That's just a lot of money sitting there. Other uses, putting money into the 115 trust, reducing the long-term debt, doing an economic development reserve, putting money aside for capital projects, which there are more to be done. And the other thing to keep in mind with the 2.2 million, while it's a goodly sum that's here, as the city gets grants, the city needs cash to pay for those, because the city does not get cash. The city gets reimbursed. So the city has to spend, that 150 or whatever amounts are, the grants are, the 220,000 fire reduction, fuel reduction. The city has to spend that money and then get reimbursed. So city needs to have money available in order to get some of these grants. Otherwise, I have one agency that I work with, and they're very tight on cash. Sometimes we have to hold up on paying bills so that there's enough money to pay the bills while we're waiting for reimbursement. So there's plenty of considerations, and staff is looking at coming back with mid-year with a policy on how best to use the fund balance. John, your thoughts, comments?
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. So Councilmember Lintel, this is where we get back to your question. And so about what do we do about long-term debt and some of the other opportunities. So as Roberto mentioned, we have about a $2.3 million current fund balance in the general fund. A lot of that was because of wise decision-making by the council with previous fund balance, with cannabis monies as those came in initially at high levels, and putting that together and holding that in an economic resiliency reserve, which was new for the city and helps the city. We have very narrow revenue streams. And as Councilmember Donaldson mentioned, we're highly dependent on one or two tax generators in our community. And if something were to happen to that and we didn't have the tax money from those generators, we'd have to be making some tough decisions. And because we have such narrow revenue streams, and we have an opportunity for the future to diversify our portfolio, but right now dealing with current realities, we're not as resilient and as agile when it comes to dealing with economic downturns, depending on what they are. We actually didn't take as big of a hit through the pandemic as some of our neighboring cities that rely a little bit more on TOT. But you see them bouncing back and then some now as we're coming out of the pandemic, whereas we're staying fairly stably. That's why we're proposing the status quo budget. But we are in a unique situation for our community where we do have some of these resources, and we're using that to deal with some of the pent-up need. We've addressed those issues over the last few minutes, and we'll be building that into the budget for next month for you all to consider for adoption. But we still have opportunities with some of this fund balance. And I think we need to be mindful of how we use that and actually have a strategy for how we use that, because we do have some outlying needs that need a little bit more thought and strategy for how we go forward. Long-term debt is one of those. So that's why we put the recommendation. The council policy currently is to use fund balance $150,000 a year to the Section 115 funding. Roberto made very strong argument for why that's a good idea. Dino made that argument. Jeff continued that. I'm going to make that argument. So I think we need to get back in the habit of doing that. That is a solid investment for us. kind of constrains what we can use that money for, but it only constrains it in a way that still benefits us because we have CalPERS costs going forward, and that money is always available to use that, but it's returning a higher yield on the investment. And so we had a 10-year plan to get that fully funded. This gets us back on track to that 10-year plan. And so that's our recommendation for action in June. Some of the other opportunities that we have, specifically paying off long-term debt, I don't think that the decision time is ripe for that right now, mainly because there are some other considerations that are going to take a few months at least, probably until mid-year, and we can come back at mid-year budget to make some of these decisions. And that mainly being that we're going to be looking at potential development opportunities for the former Fort Ord properties. There may be opportunity to negotiate some of the long-term debt into that agreement with any developer who comes in. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse and start paying off that debt before we have a chance to have those discussions. And paying off the long-term debt starts a time clock. Once we start making payments, now we're on a clock for paying it off. And we other than just being good stewards of our money and taking care of debt that's accruing interest, we're not under the gun right now to start paying that debt because the debt is directly tied to future development on the former Fort Ord. Because when the debt was incurred and when the terms were agreed upon, it was understood that the city's ability to repay that debt was going to be contingent upon bringing in money from future development. So again, I don't want to get us into a situation where we've arbitrarily created a burden on ourselves when there might have been opportunity to have other options for paying that debt off. I think within the next 6 to 9 months, we're going to be in a position to know better what our time clock looks like and what our future options are. So we can come back with a policy and a recommendation specifically for the long-term debt and how we deal with that. And then going forward, I'm anticipating that we're going to be in this situation for a while. That's my plan, is that we're always going to have opportunities to have fund balance to reallocate at the end of a fiscal year. And so I would, as part of the fiscal policy development, I want to have a fund balance policy that outlines for staff where the council's priorities are for making recommendations for utilizing that funding. And Roberto outlined all of those. A key interest for me is capital projects. I think fund balance is one-time money, and one-time money is best used for things like long-term debt, for debt service, for grant matching, or for capital projects. So that's where I'd like to see it go. But we'll come back probably at mid-year adjustment with those policies and with the recommendation at that time. So I'd like to hold off on, other than the 150,000, I'd like to hold off for a few months before we talk about what to do with the outstanding money. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Great, thank you. Excuse me. So Pat, you're first.
Thank you, John, for the explanation, and it all makes sense. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, John.
Mr. Donaldson.
Yeah, also, thanks, City Manager. Appreciate the rundown. I think it's important that those from the public that are listening to this meeting and, also the City Council understand that we've got a $2.3 million fund balance, but on a whole, the city is about $2.2 million in debt. And you heard the city manager talk about how we as a city have fared okay in relationship to other cities on the peninsula because we don't have the exposure to tourism, but we did get the benefit of the COVID relief money. And just to give you kind of an idea in terms of tourism, the only thing that we have that is related to tourism dollars is the transient occupancy tax that we get on some of our short-term rentals. And we've got about 20 of them out there, and they pulled in about $60,000, which is more than 4 of our 5 cannabis businesses combined. And, you know, I talked earlier about how we're kind of operating on a razor's edge here, that we're really reliant on those 2 businesses I talked about before. And in terms of cannabis, one of those companies owes us about $400,000. And our dispensary revenue continues to decline because of competition and market saturation. So we're at a point now where we benefited in a lot of ways from the pandemic. Safeway did, because of the additional buying, and Roberto alluded to that earlier. And you know, we've in the past benefited from cannabis because we were obviously early to that market, and we reap the benefits of it. But as the pandemic has waned, we're going to start seeing a decrease in the major drivers of the revenue for the city. So I say all of that because we've got to be real careful. In terms of how we allocate the money, I completely agree that the $150,000 for the Section 115 trust, absolutely we need to do that. And I was speaking with the city manager earlier, and there's a certain amount of money that we need to hold to the side for uncertainties. And from what he was explaining to me, that's about 25 to 30% of our our funded balance, and which equates to about 1.1 million or so. So we've got to hold that to the side as well. So I think money needs to go to that. And lastly, the debt that we have, we owe federal development 1.4 million. It increases at a compounded rate of about 40K a year. And we need to address it, but I understand what the city manager is saying, that that's tied very close to the development, and we don't want to put the cart before the horse. But it also shows how important that development is to the city, not only for the debt that we have, but also one of the other main drivers for revenue for our city is the property tax that we get from the houses within the city. So not only is this development touch on the affordable housing issues that we're faced with, but it also is the revenue driver of property taxes. So I like the areas that were mentioned that we need to allocate the money towards, and those are the amounts, or, you know, kind of in general terms, how I recommend we allocate them.
Okay, Ms. Shirley.
Yeah, thank you, John and Roberto, for reviewing this. I have a question in terms of, I know you want a balanced budget every year, but John, I'm glad you mentioned that you do expect a fund balance at the end of each year, because I was a little confused in terms of, I know we want that $150,000 in the Section 115, because it seems like a really good use of our money. And so I sort of wonder, is that always going to be our priority? And will we always have a fund balance to at least satisfy the $150,000 in that Section 115 trust? Or do we expect more? I'm just wondering, like, or do we budget part of that every year? Maybe not, you know, the whole thing, but I mean, it seems like it's a good return on our money. It's a debt that we are going to have to owe anyways. And so I'm just wondering, do we budget part of that? Do we just always expect we'll have a fund balance of 150,000? So we make that the priority? I guess I need a little better understanding in terms of your thinking in terms of balanced budget, fund balance, and that Section 115 trust.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, our revenue streams are pretty steady. And as we're coming out of the pandemic, as I mentioned, some of the surrounding jurisdictions are getting a bump that we're not getting because they're getting TOT, and you know, travel right now is booming, and we're getting it as Councilmember Donaldson mentioned in our short-term rentals, but that's a very limited pot. And so no, we're not always going to have fund balance because our margin between our expected revenue and our expected expenditures is really tight. And so it comes close every year. We do an excellent, we're a very conservative community. We have a very conservative, fiscally conservative direction from the council and fiscally conservative staff. So that's great. So we don't go crazy and start spending a lot of money. But we also can't, we can't ride over speed bumps the way that surrounding communities can because of our lack of diversity of revenue. So right now, everything's looking good. I don't know what's on the horizon. I've been personally predicting a recession for at least 3 years. So what do I know? But my crystal ball is only as good as Roberto's crystal ball. And right now, with our partners with HDL, everything's looking steady with gradual increase. So as long as that's the pattern, yes, we will continue to have fund balance. A lot of our ability to have fund balance comes through staff's management. After we get the spending plan from you all on the budget, then it's up to me, to the chief, to Ron managing capital projects, to Roberto helping us, and how we manage to that. And there's always, because we're conservative, we budget with a gap between, in our minds, when we're planning our operational budget, the budget comes out as a balanced budget, but in our minds, there's always wiggle room because there's always contingencies that you can't plan for. We're managing to those. And so if we've all done our jobs and there haven't been major economic hiccups that have hit us, then yes, we should always have a fund balance. And then that would be what we use for the 115. The plan will be to get us to a point where we've diversified our revenue streams to the point where we have more flexibility and we can actually actively plan in the budget at the start of the fiscal year with the anticipated revenues to budget for things like contingency funds and the Section 115 funding, that type of thing. That's the goal. That's what we want to get to, is having the flexibility in our resources to where we can proactively budget those things rather than as oh, hey, look, we have some money. Let's be conservative with this and put it into these reserves. But again, like I said, it's good because in the past, we never even had that option. We were just living paycheck to paycheck. So we're light years ahead of where we were even just 5-6 years ago. So we're building the foundation budgetarily so that now we can start the work on the house.
Got it. Okay. All right. No, that's a great explanation. And I like where you're going with everything. So yeah, that's good. Thank you.
So I agree with everything. I like having a targeted date to kind of talk about the big things, especially after an economic development ad hoc committee and some development updates and that kind of thing. Tied to that, and I didn't realize it wasn't the last time we gave to the 115 was in 2020. I would like to suggest that we double our give to up to $300,000 this year, and to help us split the difference with the years that we've missed. It's in the scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, and if we're not making a decision for another 8 or 9 months, that is just making sense to me. I too think that there's going to be an economic downturn, whether it's increased inflation or a true stock market, 30 to 40% crash. We're long overdue. And so I totally agree with keeping the majority, but I also think that we should be taking advantage of that, even if it's 10% or 15% for yet again another one of our debts. So that would be my suggestion at this point. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I said, while we have the opportunities before us to plan for future contingencies, I'm always wholeheartedly supportive of that. I think we've done excellent work. You all have done excellent work in the last few years, and anything we could do to expand that is great.
So shall I go back to the council to see how they feel about it, to get a sense about that, or?
Yeah, you can. I think we have consensus. I see a lot of head nodding, and we'll come back with a policy on these things, but I'm always happy to hear more from the council.
Does anyone have any thoughts about contributing 300,000 instead of 150 to the 115 trust?
I'd be in favor of that. I think we have the ability to do that, and it's well worth our money at this point to get caught up. We'll appreciate that in the future. So
okay.
I think we should take advantage of that. Yeah.
Got it. Mr. Donaldson?
Yeah, I think it should be done in the context of everything that we're talking about. I mean, you know, we're talking about a police salary increase. We're talking about, you know, an uncertainty fund. There are a lot of different things that we've talked about, you know, a raise for Ron. I think now it's the opportunity for the city manager to take all that information that we've given him and then come back in light of those other recommendations that we've made and say, hey, here's how much I think is prudent to put into that trust fund. So I think that's the key at this point. And I think, like he had mentioned, I think he's got a lot of feedback and a lot of information in order to do that analysis.
Okay, Pat?
I totally agree with what Scott just said, and I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Okay. So let's go out to the public. This is the end of the budget discussion, correct?
Yes.
Roberto, John? Okay, so let's go out to the public. Any comments on the recommendations, the fund analysis, anything like that? This is the last opportunity to talk about the budget this month. We will do it again next month. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll bring it back. John, you have plenty of thoughts from us?
I do, and we have another opportunity to talk with the finance committee before we bring it back to the council too.
Okay, so are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, Roberto, as always, thank you so much. Your explanations are fabulous.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in a couple of weeks, right?
Yep.
For the next iteration. Thank you. So let's move on to staff reports. The first one is city manager. You have one in the packet, but would you like to share anything?
I do, yeah. Anybody who's been down on Angeles or even just driven by on 218 has noticed that there's a lot of work going on in the park. So there's new playground equipment that's currently being installed. We'll be installing in the next month or so some new bocce courts. We've made a few minor modifications to the dog park to allow for space for the bocce courts and to improve the watering area for the dogs. So that fence work just finished today. The basketball court, tentatively, we're looking at next month for pouring a new slab for a new basketball court. And then in August, well, June for pouring the slab, then July or August for actually finalizing the new basketball court and completely redoing the parking lot and restriping. And then we're also going to do some new striping and signage for parking to clarify what's appropriate parking in the cul-de-sac of Angeles and down to at least the immediate neck of Angeles away from the park, so that we can work to mitigate some of the parking issues down there. But all of that's to say, thank you to everybody for your patience with the work that's going on. I know it could probably get frustrating occasionally with some of the parking lot closures and with all the tape and hurricane fencing. But by the time it's done and when Ron and all the contractors have done the work down there, it's going to be an incredible park. It's already an incredible park. We get people from all around the community and the peninsula utilizing the park. And again, we're just going to continue to be the envy of the other communities. We are in works in the process of trying to plan a park reopening in conjunction with CAG's Ice Cream Social. Because of all the construction down there, we want to make sure we get the timing right. We don't impact park projects, but we also have an environment where people want to come and celebrate the park, celebrate coming out of the pandemic, celebrate summer, celebrate our community. So stay tuned. We're trying to get a date set where we can get that to happen, but it'd be great to see everybody in public in a safe environment where we can all have some fun. So stay tuned. We'll be getting that message out soon. And with that, I don't know, Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No. Just, investigating crimes. Our cops are doing real good work, and we have some cases that we'll be solving soon. And hopefully we'll update you guys in the next month or so.
Right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to say, kind of before we wrap up the main meeting, that we will be doing a flag raising on Wednesday, June 1st at 5 o'clock to raise the pride flag. So if you'd like to join us, 5 o'clock. So the council reports are also in the agenda packet. The correspondence, MST, TAMC, and the Mosquito Abatement District notes are in the agenda packet. And now it's time for us to go to closed session. But before we do that, anyone wishing to address the city, excuse me, the city council on an item to be discussed in closed session may do so now. As usual, there will be a 3-minute limit and no action will be taken. So the 2 items we will be discussing is existing litigation and a conference with a real property negotiator. Are there any public comments before the council goes into closed session? I'm not seeing any. So to bring it back to the council, we will go into a different room and have a discussion. You are welcome to hang out here. We will come back out and Alex, our attorney, will say if there's anything to report out. If you do leave, hope you have a wonderful May. Please vote by June 7th. And on that, Karen, will you be pulling us off into the closed session room?
Yes, I'm figuring it out right now.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight and all your flags. Oh. Somebody check to make sure. I don't know if we lost. There she is. Okay. City Attorney Lorca.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to the two closed session items, updates were provided to council, but no reportable action was taken.
Thank you. So our next meeting is Tuesday, June 28, 2022 at 6 o'clock. On that, we are adjourned. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Night.